Okie dokie. So, the ancient Hebrews. So, the Hebrew civilization, as you may have guessed, was in Canaan, which is northeast of Egypt. We went and did our time with geography. We've looked at the area of Canaan. We looked at some of the other Canaanites, the Phoenicians. So this is the region we're talking about, right along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the Hebrew kingdom, when we say flourish, is going to be very powerful, very prominent between 1800 BCE and 70 CE. We mark 70 CE as the end, and remember CE and AD are the same thing. Because this is when the temple at Jerusalem will be destroyed, and we're going to have the diaspora. Now, the founders of Judaism were Hebrews, and the person in charge, the founder of this religion, is going to be a man named Abraham. Now, Judaism is going to be of note because it is going to be the world's first major monotheistic religion. And one of the things that we're going to see with this is that the other main monotheistic religions, so we have Judaism, then Christianity, and Islam. Sikhism is also monotheistic, as is Zoroastrian. They are going to trace their roots to Judaism. So, for example, Christians, their Bible, which, gosh golly, I can't believe I don't have one down here. They're all upstairs. Starts with the Old Testament, which is a set of books, and then has the New Testament. Islam doesn't have the Old or New Testament, but goes and refers to many of the stories that are found in the Torah as some of their foundational texts as well, leading to what then the Quran was created. So Judaism, foundation of Christianity, Islam as well. And thankfully, you guys already know that monotheism is the belief in one God. And this is going to be the main differentiating feature between our Jews and the neighboring groups, because they are going to only believe in one God, whereas everyone else we've talked about thus far have believed in multiple gods. Okay, now, their sacred text is the Torah. Now, typically, you might hear the Torah as the Old Testament from our perspectives, just because it's a more modern term for it, but the Torah would be the name of the first several books of, sometimes it's called the Hebrew Bible as well. The Torah is broken up into different things, like the Pentateuch is the first five books of the Bible. That's your Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and all those things. You know, people still read those today. I mean, I'm actually in the middle of Leviticus right now with my yearly Bible reading plan. So it's, you know, people are still reading these even if you're not Jewish. The literal meaning of Torah is God's teaching, which, as we can see, and that there are a lot of teachings in it. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky, though. So typically, when we have history, we like to go and have lots of different sources, lots of different things, but our main source of information about the Hebrews, especially the founding fathers like Abraham, Moses, Saul, David, is the Torah. You know, it's unique for the Hebrews where the religious text is also their historical text. You know, we didn't see that with the Assyrians. You know, with the Assyrians, you know, we got their history from what people wrote about them and not their not the religious text. But so when we're talking about these stories, you know, we're using the Torah as our source. So don't be alarmed if you're hearing or reading things that are straight out of, you know, Genesis or Exodus or anything like that, because that's the source we have. And it's actually been super interesting because some people had this question when they said, oh, well, if we only have this as our text, how do we know it's true? And some people didn't want to believe some of the historical aspects of it. But then Danny's like digging in, you know, present day Israel, Palestine. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is where we think, like, the city of Jericho was. We know, oh, this really was a real place. And so we're seeing actually now archaeology is catching up and kind of confirming some of the things. Like some people for a while thought there's a king that was very famous for the Hebrews, King David. Some of you might be familiar with the story of David and Goliath. And a lot of people are like, we don't know if this King David guy was even real. And then, actually, within modern times, we found some, I can't remember what civilization was, but I think between Egypt and like the Assyrians, we found all these references to King David. And then scholars of the Torah were like, hey, see, we told you that this is a historical document as well. That's pretty interesting. Now, one of the things about the Torah we have to also acknowledge is Maddox said that Judaism probably started around 4,000 years ago or so. That's a really long time. We don't have any copies of the Torah that are 4,000 years old. And part of the reason why is because originally these things were memorized and passed down orally, meaning Zoe went and told her daughter Zoe the second, and then Zoe the second told her daughter Zoe the third, and so on and so forth. And eventually those things were written down. By the time it got to Karen, Karen was like, I can't remember all this. I need to write it down. So that's why we don't have, 4,000-year-old copies of this, because originally it was an oral tradition and then was written down. But, like I said, archaeology is going and helping us understand the context of a lot of these things. And we're seeing a lot of correspondence with what was said. And, yeah. So, I'm going to move on to some beliefs in a moment. Now, as I said, the founder of the Judaism, or the father of the Hebrews, is a man named Abraham. Now, Abraham was not born named Abraham. He was actually born named Abram. And he was from the city of Ur, which we talked about when we were in Mesopotamia. So he's all the way in Mesopotamia. And as the story goes, he hears the voice of God and says, Abram, pack up your family and go to the land of Canaan, the land of milk and honey. Now, I know if I heard a random voice, I'd probably think, okay, I might be going cuckoo. But Abram trusted the voice and took his family and went to Canaan. And Canaan, like I said, we talked about, and that's this area over yonder. And he had sheep, he had goats, he had all these animals. And then, with the history of it, we go and see that around 1800 or so, we believe the Hebrews started living in Egypt, in a land called the land of Goshen. Yeah. So we have around 1800, we believe, the Hebrews wind up going to Egypt. So this is going to be kind of near the end of the Second Kingdom. And they're in Egypt. And we have the whole story about, oh gosh, man, my head hurts and now I'm forgetting things. So Joseph going and wind up being the Grand Vizier, going getting land for his family because of a famine going around. But we know, and this goes with the Torah as well, that the Egyptians eventually made the Hebrew slaves. They kept on flourishing, and we're going to go through these things a little bit more in depth when we get to Moses or things like that. And we believe around 1250 to 1200, we have something called the Exodus, where we have the Hebrews leaving Egypt and then going around, wandering through the Sinai Peninsula, through the desert there, over on Mount Sinai, which we think is around here-ish. We have the Ten Commandments coming into play, and then eventually they're going to go up, cross the Jordan River, and into Israel. So, by 1000, we believe there was King David, who is going to be the most famous of the Hebrew kings. So this is a quick summary of some of the historical things that we're going to hit upon as we go through this unit. And now, finally, we're going to get into some of the key beliefs of Judaism, which is our main focus for today. So we want to make sure we understand these things. So Judaism teaches that there's one God, and He is all-powerful, all-knowing, meaning He can do everything can do anything and knows everything. And for Jews, they believe it is their duty to honor and obey that God. Now, here's something that's really cool, though. So for Jews, they believe that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, which is pretty scary when you think about like this all-powerful, knowing God. But Jews believe that they can speak to God through prayer. So that that this God, although all-powerful, is also all-loving and all-caring. So that God can be approached. Now, there's going to be a huge emphasis on the law in Judaism. And the foundation of the law is going to be with the 10 Commandments. You probably are familiar with at least some of those commandments. You know, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, steal, thou shalt honor your mother and father, all of those great things. But there are also going to wind up being actually hundreds of laws. And like I said, I've been reading the book of Leviticus at the moment. And yeah, there are a lot of laws. Don't boil a goat in its mother's milk, important stuff to know like that. Now, key difference between our Hebrews and the other groups we've talked about. Every group we've talked about thus far has seen their leaders as gods. When we were in Mesopotamia, they had priest kings, or having to do with their religion, I should say. So priest kings, going talking to the gods and being their rulers. Egypt, they were, gods and kings. Hebrews, they were just people. And the Hebrews always acknowledge them just as people. Because remember, they're monotheistic. So they can't have more than one God. They can't go and say, Queen Evelyn's a goddess, and then also worship Yahweh, which is the typical name that they gave for God. So what is that term, again, when they believe in one God? Because this is an important vocabulary word. We have to really know it. So when you only believe in one God, it is Kirthana. Yes, darling.
Monotheism.
Monotheism. Yay. Is that what you're going to say, Zoster? Of course,
yes.
Got it. Yes. Wunderbar. Now, another thing that's really cool about Judaism, which we have not seen in our other civilizations, is this idea of equality. Remember, in Sumer in Egypt, some people were considered better than others. If you were close to the top, you were considered better, had more rights, whereas in Judaism, all people are equal in God's sight. Now, so like I said, knowing the law is important, and rabbis are going to be the teachers to do it. So a Jewish teacher is a rabbi. So rabbi, so a great analog would be, so for people who have priests or pastors, the Jewish equivalent would be a rabbi. Finally, there's something called the Talmud, which I'm not going to focus on too much, but basically it's an oral tradition and a way that they can also try to understand the Torah and explain it to others. We're not going to really worry about the Talmud, so I'm not going to really have you guys worry about it, but that is something to be aware of. So my cherubs, that is our introduction to Judaism. Do we have any questions or comments? I know I threw a lot at you, kind of. Sorry. I should have broken this up and then just had Abraham in this in one day. Any questions or comments? Okie. Hopefully for some of you that sparks some memories. You're like, oh yeah, I've heard some of this before. Now, today, your assignment in your Monday 11:30 folder would be to work on Chapter 6, Lesson 1, Part 2. So please make sure that you go and get started on that one. This one is 3 questions? 4 questions. So you have 4 question roonies. You have 4 minutes to get started on it, and it will be due at the end of the day today. So you guys are more than welcome to sign off, get started, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Au revoir. See you
Bye.
Bye. Adios. Sayonara. Auf Wiederhören.
Bye.
Later.
Should we start working on our work?
If you'd like to. I mean, you might be able to get a question or two done so you don't have to do it later. It's up to you. So see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye bye. Oh, I should end the recording, shouldn't I? Oops.